So welcome everyone. My name is Kathy Dugan. I'm the director of the Cleveland Law Library, and I'd like to wish you all happy National Library Week. This is our signature event for the week. Dave, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, everybody, thank you for joining. My name is Dave Furious. I'm a librarian assistant in the Cleveland Public Library System. I work at the City Hall Public Administration Branch. Thank you.
And Dave and I have collaborated on these book discussions with our two libraries for many years now. Today, we are very happy to have Ken joining us and his editor, Parker. And Ken is an author, a cyclist, an attorney, and a member of our library. And Ken has written a great book for us, for both cyclists and drivers, I will note, who want to understand the rules of the road, what they can and cannot do, what they can maybe get away with. And he does provide us with some good background on cases that he's aware of and some that he's handled so that you can understand the repercussions of accidents that can happen on the road. So we've provided some seed questions to Ken to get the ball rolling. So I thought I would start off with a softball, if that's okay. So what prompted you to write your book, Ken?
Okay, thanks, Kath. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for allowing me to talk about my book. I love the Cleveland Law Library. It's just so nice to be there. It's quiet, it's beautiful. And I thank the Cleveland Public Library for their time too, David. I appreciate this. What prompted me to write the book? Well, all my life I've been a personal injury lawyer. Kind of in general, car accidents, things like that. And then I became an avid cyclist in my mid-50s, and I mean avid, I would go out quite a bit. And because I'm an attorney and because I'm a cyclist, when I ride, I look at what's happening. What are cyclists doing right? What are they doing wrong? Why do accidents happen? How can they be avoided? What should you do to be safe? What should you not do on the road? And that's the way my mind works. So it kind of evolved into my actual law practice that now my focus is on bicycle, protecting Cleveland bicyclists or greater Cleveland bicyclists. And I do injury cases, and I do a lot more promotion for bike things. So it was a good evolution for me from a general injury lawyer into a specific needed area of law it's often misunderstood, and that's bike law. So what I also saw was, in the driver's education classes, they teach very little about bicycles and what bicycles can and cannot do on the road. Some teach nothing at all in driver's education, and even on the testing, there's very little on there too. And when you come to a bike, riding a bike, there is actually no required licensing to ride a bike. So there was a huge gap of knowledge between the motorists and the cyclists as to what the cyclists' rights were on the road. So I wanted to write this book to fill in the gap of knowledge so that cyclists and motorists would know better what cyclists can and cannot do on the road. And that was the genesis of the book. It took a couple years to write. And during that time period, of course, the pandemic occurred, and bike shops were essential businesses, which tells you how important bikes are for commuting, transportation, recreation. And people dusted off their old bikes. People bought brand new bikes. In fact, there's a bike boom going on right now. You can almost not even find one when you go to a bike shop. So definitely the boom has occurred. And there's also an acceptance going on. There's Velisano, there's Pan Ohio. I see Judge Polster on that. There's a lot of cycling going on and a lot of events, and people are understanding how important cycling is to their health and how important it is for us for emissions on the road and for other activities for people. So all those things occurred. And with the boom, it just made it more important for me to write this book so people can better understand the rights. Also, the Birdgate happened. All of a sudden, a bunch of e-scooters are dropped off in the city of Cleveland, and all hell breaks loose. And so, the city has passed laws, and now the state has passed an e-bike law. So I added that in too. Autonomous vehicles we address because obviously we care about vulnerable road users, pedestrians and cyclists. And we want to make sure that when these AV vehicles come out, they detect us, which they really aren't doing as of yet. So all those reasons, I got together with my editor here, Lisa Parker Green. She outlined the chapters, and I started from Kindergarten 101, that, cyclists can ride on the road. They can't be confined to the sidewalk. They can't be confined to the bike trail in metro parks. And we went into bike cases and bike law and what to do if a crash occurs and bike statistics. And we kind of filled in the chapters as we went along. We also did a bunch of photographs with Keith Bear Productions. I see Linda Barbaric is there. Keith, Linda and I would go out on the road, and I would take my bike and we'd take various pictures of cars passing me 3 feet. The first bicycle light in Cleveland at Superior Bridge in Detroit. And so I would wear my Bike Cleveland outfit and we'd go out there and take pictures. And then other laws came into effect, like the 3-foot passing law, the dead red. So things kept developing, and we finally were able to finish the book last year. And it's been out there and doing fairly well on the market. When people talk about the bike, I really like them to buy them from Bike Cleveland. I donate those bikes to Bike Cleveland. All profits go to Bike Cleveland. So if you do want a bike, just get a hold of Bike Cleveland and buy one there. They're also available at several Northeast Ohio bike shops. I also provide them to the bike shops to sell and to provide to any new people that buy a bike. So that's basically it on my end.
It's you on the front, right?
Not the bike, buy a book. But
It's
when
you.
they buy a bike, they're supposed to get a free book.
So it's you on the front, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And that's the first bike-specific light in Cleveland. That's why we took that photograph.
Gotcha. So how you mentioned your editor, your publisher. How did you find Parker?
Well, Parker has been working here in marketing, and she's also an editor. So if I have a demand letter, she edits and things of that nature. Why don't you come around here? And so we developed the idea, and she put the chapters in and did a great job. And I can tell everybody out there, she has never misspelled a word in her life. So that was very helpful.
Thank you.
Gotcha. So the intersection on the cover, is there a reason you chose this particular one?
Right. It's the first bike-specific light. In other words, there's a bike light that goes green with a bike on it, yellow with a bike on it, and red. And the reason that's important is because it's bike-specific traffic control device. And when we have those, bike compliance goes way up. Another reason I picked this intersection is because there are bike boxes there. And those are the green things in the picture. So when you get up to the light and you're heading east on the Detroit Superior Bridge and you get to Ontario, you stop and you have a bike light. Now, if you want to turn left there, there's a lot of drama getting over in that left lane and trying to turn left on Ontario. So how do we avoid that drama? By the city engineers installing bike boxes. So we stop in a bike box, and when we proceed, we're like a pedestrian. We cross the street, we ride across the street into another bike box where we turn from this way to this way, and then we make the turn with the lane, the traffic that is proceeding northbound, so we don't have to have the drama of a left-hand turn. So that's a double bike box, and it's at both on the east and the west end of the Detroit Superior Bridge. And it's very helpful to get you to safely make a left-hand turn, which is always a problem for a cyclist.
And I noticed there in that picture, there's a bike light, a red, blue, or a red, green, and yellow light. Does that light also make you turn left or right? Does that give you an arrow?
No, the reason it doesn't, Dave, is because it's a bike box. It only gives you, straight or stop, because they don't want you to turn left there. They want you to proceed into the bike box and then turn your bike so that you're not facing straight.
Okay.
So, yes, there is no turn lane there. Good point.
So what's a dead red light then?
Well, that's a law that came into effect when the 3-foot rule passed in Ohio, and it's sometimes misunderstood. It's not the Idaho stop rule. In Idaho, they treat a red light as a stop and a stop sign as a yield, but that's not the case in Ohio. In Ohio, you have to follow the traffic control device, but they made an exception, and it's called the dead red exception, and that means only if the light will not activate. In other words, many of these lights will not detect the cyclist's presence on the road because it doesn't weigh enough to trip the light. So you'd be sitting there at a red light and, for too long a period of time. And once you realize that the light is not detecting you, you're allowed to go through that light on red, but you no longer have the right of way, and you have to be very careful when you do. Also, if the light is malfunctioning and it's just stuck on red, you can do it too. But it's not a license to go through a red light. It's only a license to go through a light that doesn't detect us or a light that is malfunctioning. And
Funny you should say that. On the way in, there was a cyclist beside me coming in today, and he kept blowing through those red lights.
Yeah, it does happen. When you hit a red light and there's no street to your right and only a street to your left, you're really pretty comfortable thinking you're okay. But you never know, and technically that cyclist should be stopping at every red light. But again, in other states, they don't have to.
Gotcha. And we want to avoid injury, obviously, to the cyclists and, the drivers and whatnot, and pedestrians.
Yeah,
so
it's not fair. The driver's in a 2,000-pound armored vehicle, and the cyclist is on a 19 to 30-pound two-wheeled vehicle. So it's never fair. So it is important to watch out for cyclists because they're the ones that are going to get hurt.
That's right. And it seemed like from your book that the accident cases you discussed were very fact determinative. Is that true?
That's true. There were more, a premise bike accident case is specific. It's like premise liability. They either create the defect or they have to have knowledge of it. So that's fact specific, or if it's open and obvious. And then there's criminal cases where a motorist might sideswipe a cyclist, get out of my way kind of thing. I'm going to get you off the road. And there was actually a case in Cuyahoga County where a cyclist was sideswiped in that situation. They sustained minor harm, but a felonious assault is causing any harm by means of a deadly weapon. And they found that the car was a deadly weapon, and the minor injury equated to that motorist being convicted of felonious assault. That's a second-degree felony, and that's motorist was facing prison time. But on appeal, they found that the cyclist never fell off the bike. He was only slightly injured, so they couldn't prove that the motorist knowingly injured that cyclist. But believe me, that could have gone either way in the jury trial or in the Court of Appeal. So they are fact specific, but they could go either way. And then there's other cases where cyclists are riding and they get pulled over by the police for really no reason, and they get a little combative with the police, they get charged, and what happens there? And unfortunately, the cyclists have won when they get pulled over really for no reason, except in Kent, there was a cyclist riding with a cup in his left hand, waving in his right hand in the middle of the road in downtown Ravenna, and they found that cyclist guilty of reckless operation. And that could have gone either way too. I've seen many cyclists that can ride with one hand, no hands. They're getting, goo out of their pocket, or they're drinking water. So that case could have gone either way too. But yes, the facts are very specific. In injury cases, they're kind of similar to a motor vehicle crash. There has to be liability, and it has to be caused by the unsafe driver. And then there has to be damages that justify, bringing the case. And I've handled almost 100 bicycle accident cases, and they all vary, with the facts. But they're a lot like motor vehicle cases with a lot of extra bike-specific laws and equipment differences that apply.
Do you want to tell us about your most interesting case?
I think they're all interesting, really, and I really enjoy helping cyclists get the protection they need and recover. One interesting case was a medical student who was riding home at night, a commuter. He got to a light that was changing. He turned left and unfortunately was killed by an oncoming vehicle. Well, the police in that town did a very thorough investigation, and they found that the cyclist was completely at fault. And they put that into the police report as 100% at fault. But when I looked at the case, I got the footage of the motorist leaving the gas station, a mile or two from where the crash occurred. And this is after 9 o'clock at night when the sun is down. And that motorist did not have his lights on. But this cyclist, who was a very well-known safe cyclist, had a front activated white light, a rear activated red light. So now we have a situation where I have a cyclist compliant with the equipment requirements, but the motorist wasn't. So my argument was, hey, the motorist didn't have their lights on. This safe cyclist wouldn't have turned if he would have seen the lights on from the cyclist. And then the police did an investigation. They go, even if the motorist didn't have his lights on, the cyclist still should have seen him. And that didn't make any sense to me either. And we kept pushing it, and we were successful in getting the policy limits, but it's not going to bring back this young medical student's blossoming life and career. So it was heartbreaking, but I really took the stance of the cyclist, and I could see why that cyclist would make a left-hand turn if an oncoming car doesn't have their lights on, because it's not that easy to see when you're coming up to a road. That was one of my interesting cases, but to me, they're all interesting.
And building off of that, do you know of any updates with the distracted driver legislation going on in Ohio?
Yeah, that's a really good question, David. There was plenty of momentum to make distracted driving a primary offense, and it was tagged onto a recent bill, but that bill did not pass on the distracted driving, so we're making a left-end run to bring it back to make distracted driving a primary offense in the state of Ohio. It is primary in a lot of local municipalities. And when I say primary, I mean that you can be pulled over for, holding your cell phone or texting just in and of itself. Right now, it's a secondary offense if you cause an accident and you're driving or texting or otherwise distracted, which means anything not reasonably related to your driving the car. You're petting your dog, you're looking down at your seat. That's only secondary offense, which means you have to have another traffic offense before they can cite you for that. But distracted driving is very similar to drunk driving. If you text for 5 seconds on the road at 55 miles an hour, you went 100 yards blind. That's a football field length. So it's very dangerous, and it's very important that this bill is ultimately passed. And I have full faith and confidence that soon in Ohio, driving distracted will be a primary offense.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, Judge.
Ken, from your experience, you said you've handled about 100 accident cases. Are there things that you've seen that those of us who ride a lot should do to be safe? All right. I mean, we've obviously being defensive, driving defensively, riding defensively, but have you seen some things, understanding what drivers are doing and not doing, that those of us who ride a lot and are in traffic should be real careful about?
That's a very good question, Your Honor. I mean, vehicular cycling means riding in the direction of traffic, which I know you do, but not everyone does. So you ride your car like you're riding a vehicle. You follow the traffic control devices, and you try to remain as vigilant as possible. I got something I call the Stovey shout rule, and you'll probably get a kick out of this, Judge, but I grew up in west side of Cleveland here with a buddy of mine named Gary Stovey. He went to Holy Name, I went to Ignatius, but we stayed friends. So he had a 68 Chevy, and we'd be driving this in the early 70s, and all the cars back then had mechanical difficulties out the yin-yang. So his horn didn't work. So we'd be driving in Metro Parks or somewhere in the car, somebody would be pulling out in front of him, and he'd yell, "Hey!" And they would hear him, and they would stop and get out of the way. So, you know, it's one thing I use, especially I was in Florida and I'm riding and, you know, I see a car and it's in front of me and it's going to pull out. They're not looking at me. I'll give them a shout. That's one little thing. You know, visibility is important. You know, we don't want the state of Ohio instructing us on how to dress or, you know, to wear bright, reflective, contrasting clothing because some people can't afford it. Some people don't want it. If you want to be more visible, that's a good way to go. Anything on moving parts of your bicycle are more visible. So if you want a light or, you know, on your head when you're riding at night or even during the day, that's advisable. I do use bike lights during the day and at night just as an added precaution. So anything that can make yourself more visible. You want to be consistent in the way you ride. You don't want to be weaving in and out of traffic. You want to be seen. You're required to do traffic signals in the state of Ohio. So if you're merging over to make a left-hand turn, it's nice to get your arm out there to get the state required turn signal on. Now that state required turn signal, you don't have to hold it continuously. You can only do it. You only have to do it once. You don't have to do it in a turning lane. And you don't have to do it if you feel unsafe. In other words, you're about to turn, but you're not too solid on the bike. You don't even have to do it then. I also think that taking the lane is sometimes important. If the lane is too narrow for the car to safely pass you, Judge, I like to get right center in that lane. And why is that? So that the oncoming car is going to see me before it turns left in front of me. Or if I'm being passed, I'm not going to get right hooked, right hook 1 or a right hook 2. So a lot of times I do that. Finally, there's dooring. You know, a motorist should always be using their right hand when they open that door. And if you're a cyclist, you know, a lot of municipalities now have the door area where a door might open and get hit. But, you know, as you're driving down Euclid or wherever, Euclid's not a very good example because that bike lane's on the curb. But a lot of places where there are vehicles that can open their doors, you know, the motorist needs to be careful, and so does the cyclist. Helmets are not required in the state of Ohio. Are they a good idea? Yes, 75% of the fatalities occurred when cyclists weren't wearing helmets, but there is no law requiring helmets. And by the way, with this bright reflective gear, that is not required under the state of Ohio. The insurance companies can't say, well, you should have been wearing bright reflective clothing. It would be like saying the car that got rear-ended should have been painted neon yellow. But it's some things to consider for safety out there.
I think it's funny you mentioned the color, because when they sold me my car, they said, white is the safest color. I said, not in the winter. When it's snowing.
Yeah, I would also add one to be very careful when a car passes you, that they might make a quick turn in front of you.
Yeah, that's called a right hook.
A right hook, which has happened to me a number of times. And so just, you know, maybe slow down a mile or two when that car passes you to make sure they're going straight and not hooking.
Yeah, I just settled a right hook case yesterday. Same thing, same type of thing. But the crux of that is the motorist really should not be, you know, impeding on the bike lane, and because the bike lane has the right of way. So in this particular case, the motorist was pulling into a private driveway and never stopped and looked through the rearview mirror. But as a motorist, when you're moving in that bike lane, stop and look, because that cyclist could be coming up 20, 25 miles an hour behind you. So that's a very good point, Your Honor.
Yeah, I often see people driving in the bike lane. That's
illegal.
With the justice. Yes. Oh, I know. Yeah. I realize that. You mentioned briefly the right-hand turn signal, and I know there are now 2 options. Did you want to explain that?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. You know, the right-hand turn is obviously this, but you can also do this. And they call this the old school right-hand turn because younger people might not realize this means you're turning right. So as soon as I wrote that in the book, I went out with a bunch of cyclists in Geauga, and every one of them used the right-hand turn signal for this. So it's really, both of them are legal in the state. One might be more misunderstood than the other, but they're both legally fine.
I think it depends on your when you learn to ride a bike, because I learned the old one.
Yeah, so did I. So did I.
So let's talk a little bit about the e-scooters, unless someone else has a question.
I just sent one actually.
Oh, sure.
I just bought a new car, the first one I've had in a while, and it's got the most astonishing technology in terms of braking itself when obstacles are around, in terms of actually almost a bewildering set of cameras, and somehow there's even like a satellite that shows me from above and where I am. If I go to turn right and I turn on the signal, I get this whole camera that would show, for instance, a bike. Are you starting to see, or do you have hopes that all that sort of technology is going to improve safety for bikers?
Well, I think it has improved safety for sure. The big test is whether it will detect cyclists. So, you know, I'm backing out of my driveway and a car's coming down, bam, my car stops. But I don't think it would for a cyclist. So there's more testing and modifications necessary to avoid the pedestrian and the cyclist. But yeah, I do think it's a very big improvement. And, you know, as a bike advocate, I'm all for it. But I'm all for it only if it detects cyclists and pedestrians and is able to avoid those types of situations. But in general, it's a good thing.
So when they have, just one follow-up, so these self-driving cars that they at least were testing, I don't know if that's stopped now after some problems they had, but do you know, like, has there been discussion about that? For instance, with self-driving cars, if, you know, they would detect cyclists?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. They had a test where they had, you know, they had dummies that were named as cyclists and a pedestrian. I forget the names, but they all got killed. I mean, they were not detected. So there's a long way to go for that. But they definitely are testing, you know, for those types of things. But there's still quite a distance to get it safe.
Would you like to hazard a guess as to when we'll have self-driving cars here in Cleveland?
Boy, I'll tell you, it's anybody's guess. From my reading and reading the tea leaves, you know, I'm thinking 2030. And when we get fully automated cars, there might just be one lane for the fully automated cars and everybody else is driving similar. So it may not just be all vehicles. And, you know, I'm guessing maybe 2035 before it's prevalent. But these are tea leaf readings by me, and I'm really not sure.
It's already so confusing with those bus lanes on Euclid. We have another separate lane. Wow. But yeah. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, and I picture that on the highways, you know, like
yeah.
A separate automated vehicle lane on the highway.
Yeah, what about like elevated cars, you know? That'll be next, right? Like George Jetson cars.
Oh, elevated. You mean where they ride them? Yeah, well, that's probably 2070 maybe.
So let's talk about these e-scooters that descended on Cleveland, the limes and the birds and everything else. So tell us, I know you summarize it in your book, tell us a little bit about the legislation affecting them and, you know, well, all the ones you see in the wrong spots.
Yeah, they bombarded Cleveland like they did in many other cities. And Cleveland reacted to it by passing their own e-bike laws. And then basically in Cleveland, you have to be 18 to ride an e-bike. They're basically similar to the same laws that would apply to a bicycle. In other words, you can ride them on the road, you can ride them in the bike lanes, and you can ride them on the sidewalks unless it's a business district, which prohibits both those vehicles, a bike and a micromobility device. Juxtaposed to that, on April 15th, the state just passed its own micromobility device statewide rules, and they now allow e-bikes for 16 and over, whereas Cleveland allows 18 and over. So there's a little bit of conflicting legislation there. But the bottom line is e-scooters are here to stay, and they're treated similar to bicycles. And they're now regulated by the state to a degree, and also by every municipality. Cleveland just changed theirs. They were only allowed from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I just talked to Callie Mersman today from the city of Cleveland, and they've changed that to 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. that they're allowed to ride on the streets in Cleveland. So it's an up and coming thing, and it's not going to go away.
Sometimes riders.
And I assume.
I'm sorry. Cleveland it's a minor misdemeanor if you illegally park your micromobility device in the wrong place, an unsafe place, basically, but in Cleveland. But it's hard to enforce. You got to find out who had the bike and track them down and then cite them. So it's not that easy to do, and you see them scattered all over the place. Some in the right places, a lot in the wrong places.
And there's no helmet rule for those e-scooters, right?
There is.
There is
a helmet rule.
Good.
For the e-scooter, yeah, there is, and you're right about that.
Good something. Yeah. All right.
Interesting.
I haven't seen anyone wearing a helmet when they've been whizzing by on those things, though.
Yeah, you're right. For sure, the helmets are required if you're a minor, but I'm pretty sure I just read that the helmets are required.
Well, it's good if they are, but hopefully people will wear them.
Very true.
I've never tried one. I was never very good on the non-automated scooter, or my kids had them. They had the razors and everything.
Yeah. But
I don't know. I can't stand up. Are they more stable?
They seem to be. I mean, I see them now where they're riding with, it's just basically the wheel is underneath you and there's nothing to hang on to.
Yeah.
And there's people riding. I don't get that. I mean, I couldn't do that.
They go pretty fast.
Yeah, they go fast too. Could I ride an e-scooter? I like that you have a handlebar. So, I mean, if your feet are down there, you got a handlebar. I could probably do it, but I see your point.
I saw someone, it was a disc, and they were riding between their legs.
That's what I'm trying to say, the disc.
Is that an e-scooter too?
They're called one wheels.
That even qualifies as an e-scooter. It might.
Someone chimed in?
They're called one wheels.
Do you have one?
No, I don't, but I've seen them, and I have read the e-scooters, and it was pretty simple. It was very intuitive, and I didn't have a helmet, but now I know.
They don't go over 20. Those e-scooters. So.
Oh.
I ride the e-scooters occasionally downtown because I'm over in the Civic area, and if I want to go over to Prospect and East 6 or something, I could quickly get over there during my lunch break. And they're fast. They're a little unstable at higher speeds. You don't want to do a sudden jerky move or anything, but it's typical momentum. Momentum and physics hold you up like on a bike. But they're interesting.
They also have something called a bird, which is basically it looks just like a bike, but you don't pedal at all. And that's going to be up and coming too.
What's the average cost of something like that?
I'm not really sure what those things cost. I know an e-bike can go anywhere from, $500 to $10,000, e-bike 1, 2, or 3.
Wow, that's
I have an unrelated, kind of switching topics. Do you have anything to think about or cases you've experienced regarding children as passengers on bicycles? We have a European style backbeat cargo bike.
Yeah, I find that interesting when I see parents out on the road with their children, in the back of the bike. It's legal. I guess the same rules apply for any other type of cycling, but what's your specific question, Lindley?
I just didn't know if you'd had any cases or anything where people had an issue with anything like that.
No, I mean, the only issue is, you are out on the road where the cars are coming around there, and usually it's not a protected bike lane. So I mean, you take some risks, but obviously it's the motorist's responsibility not to hit you.
Right.
That's all I can think of when I see that.
What about the kids who put other kids on the front of their bikes? Is that allowed?
No, that shouldn't be allowed.
Well, I mean, we've all seen it, kids doing it.
Usually that's on a sidewalk or a playground,
Yeah.
not running around on a road.
Yeah.
With those. And sidewalks are okay, but you got to be careful because in a business district, you can't ride on a sidewalk. There's driveways that are, go right into the sidewalk. In fact, a kid in Solon was on a sidewalk that just recently got killed with a lady pulling into a driveway there. So the sidewalks are not always that safe either.
Sometimes I see like a group of young people riding in the street together in a group. And it seems like it'd be safer for them to do that. Do you recommend that?
Well, that depends. I mean, in Ohio, you're not allowed to ride more than two abreast, on the road.
Okay.
If they're riding more than two abreast, it really shouldn't be doing that. Is it sometimes good to ride in groups? Yes, it is. Because why? Because you can be seen easier that way. And it's not just young people, but there's a lot of older people that are riding together and they're drafting off each other and they're in a concise group. And while it looks kind of intimidating to a motorist, they're actually in a shorter line of group and they're easier to pass. So I don't mind riding in groups. In fact, I always feel better if I'm riding at least with one other cyclist for whatever happens.
And can you give us more information about Vision Zero, what its purpose is and what the outcome is that they want to have? Yeah,
Vision Zero started a couple years ago with Matt Zone in the city of Cleveland, and myself and Andy Young proposed side guards on commercial vehicles. They prevent a cyclist that's hit by a large vehicle from going under the vehicle and getting run over like Sylvia Bingham did. And Matt took that and ran with it and started Vision Zero in Cleveland. There's several committees, and we are getting close to passing legislation that wants to reduce to zero the number of serious injuries and deaths on our road. And it does it through infrastructure, through enforcement, through vehicle modification. And we have hired a consultant right now who is in the process of reviewing everything. And we expect that Cleveland will have its own Vision Zero law I would hope within a year, which will make our roads safer for all vulnerable road users of all types. So I'm chairman of the Vehicle and Fleet Maintenance Committee with Terrell Cole from the city of Cleveland. We meet quite often. We meet separately once a month, and we meet collectively once a month also. And I've got to meet some very important, very committed people to bike and pedestrian safety, Bike Cleveland, for instance. And I'm very proud to be on that. And I hope that at some point we can reduce fatalities and serious injuries to zero.
There are a lot of people who drive drunk, okay, and cause accidents because of that. And I noticed in your book, you talked about cyclists can only get points on their license if they, get a DUI. And so I wondered, is that a big problem?
I like your question. And my answer is no. I mean, the problem with DUI on bikes is similar to DUI on cars. I expect it's about the same percentage that ride a bike on a DUI that ride a car on a DUI. The point is only that, if you're a cyclist and you get a traffic ticket, you cannot get points. But if, however, you do drink to excess and you have a DUI, that you can get all the points that you can get as if you were riding your car. So you're a cyclist and you're out somewhere and you got your bike and you got your car. And you think, well, I think I'll just ride my bike home because it's safer. Well, it might be a little safer because you're not going to run anybody over in a car, but you can still get yourself a DUI. So what's safer there is Uber or whatever, but don't think that you can just ride a bike under the influence and not get in trouble, because you can't.
you also aren't likely to be able to control your bike the way you want to.
That's a very good point. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's for sure.
Sure. I know you had a good question about the book itself, Dave.
Yeah, I just lost you there for a minute. Oh, yeah, Ken, are you planning on creating a second edition? Because I found this book very useful for reference material. Like if someone came in the library here, looking up codes and everything, all the footnotes you added. If you were planning on making a second edition down the road, that would possibly have an index in it.
Yes, well, we absolutely are. There's been new laws that have passed since and are being passed. So we're definitely planning on a new edition as soon as we can put that all together. We do have updates on the KLF website of laws that have come since as an update in the meantime. So if you want to get on my website, which is klfohio.com, you can get updates there too. Under the cycling rights page, which is the name of the book. But that's a good point, Dave.
Do you do CLEs on bike law too?
I've done many CLEs on how to handle a bike crash, what to do, what not to do as a lawyer. I also go to different bike clubs and teach, general bike safety along the lines that we talked about today to different bike clubs. I published too in Ohio Academy of Justice articles and the Cleveland Academy of Trial Attorneys articles on bike law and how to handle bike crashes, which are unique.
Thanks very much, Ken. I got to jump off.
Good seeing you, Your Honor. Thanks for coming.
Bye, Judge.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Yeah, so other questions from the audience? Anyone else?
We got a quiet audience there.
We do, surprisingly.
It looks like Todd has one.
Well, I was interested in the DUI question. That was a good question. But, what are you have a lot of data about bike accidents. Who's really at risk out there of being hurt on a bike? Is it riding on busy streets? Is it biking drunk? Is it biking at night? How unsafe is it to be a cyclist in Cleveland during the warm months? Not in the year, but let's say June, July, August.
That's a good question, Todd, because, when bike accidents happen, they can be serious, obviously. But when you look at the total number of cyclists in the state and the number of accidents, it's relatively safe. What needs to happen is, this share the road and bike infrastructure need to protect the cyclists from unsafe motorists. Motorists need to get safe. Cyclists need to be savvy about, where they ride and how they ride and what to do and what not to do. So it isn't just one thing. The one thing that really comes to my mind is when you're riding a motor vehicle or driving a motor vehicle, you're in a 2,000-pound container. And, and I said this before, the cyclists aren't. So it's really important to consider looking a third way. You look for a car coming, a car going the other way, but you also have to look for a cyclist too, because, they're out there and they're out there in major numbers. Are there other ways to protect cyclists too? Protected bike lanes, I like them. Where there's a delineator or a barrier between the cyclists and the traffic. But in general, it's just an awareness of cyclists out there and cyclists being as vigilant as they can to try to prevent crashes. But it's mostly, to me, it's on the drivers and to not drive distracted, because that, I think, is the biggest injury risk out there, a driver that's looking at the cell phone or not looking at the wheel, because in a flash, a bike could come near around that motorist and a crash could happen.
So it sounds like, I was living in Ohio City for a long time, and I felt like I was good in Cleveland, even though, there are there's a lot of weird driving going on there. I felt safer than I feel out here in the suburbs where it's people driving SUVs and texting each other.
Yeah, and the thing about the suburbs is those roads are wide, and the wider the road, faster the people. Yeah, they move out there. So, yeah, I mean, but there are a lot of accidents happen in intersections too, which are more so, in the Ohio City area. I know actually Shaw got hit there and had a really bad brain concussion that still haunts her today in Ohio City. So it could happen anywhere. But I know what you mean about the suburbs. I ride everywhere. I ride in the city and out, and the roads out there are a little faster than I sometimes am concerned myself out there.
Yeah, all right. Wondering what it's like, I'm still going to ride, but if I'm going to ride, am I safer on one road than another? What characteristics am I looking for? And we all have our intuition about what's safe.
Yeah.
Data.
I mean, I like the Cuyahoga Valley. I mean, you can ride pretty fast on there, and there's no cars. I mean, you do come to a couple streets, but I ride on both, just depending on how I feel.
There's a question in the chat box about if you can see that, Ken. It's from Candace, and it mentions the scooter users who weave in and out of traffic, pass on the narrow right, and then make a right turn. And how, if at all, are these kinds of scenarios best addressed?
Okay, I see it. In every system, there are abuses of the rules. As a driver, I've had a number of close calls with cyclists, and especially the scooter users who say weave in and weave out of traffic, pass on them, they're all right when I make a right turn. How, if at all, are these kinds of scenarios best addressed? That's a really good point, and I do hear a lot of complaints, especially about the scooter users who have absolutely no education and are out there riding the bike, and they don't even know really what the rules are on how to ride a bike correctly. So that's a double-edged problem. I think the scooter education by reading, my book would help people that ride scooters and riding it like you would ride a bicycle lawfully in the direction of traffic and to not weave in and out. But again, I mean, what to do about that? I guess you just have to be careful and watch out when you're driving for, these type of people and for the scooter people and the bike people to follow the law. It's a problem though. And
I always wondered if there could be like a little license plate requirement. And I understand that that's, Big Brother and everything else coming into the scene, but a way to identify the abusers, because aside from the potential liability to me, I would hate to harm anyone. And
and again, Big Brother enters into licensing and all sorts of things. Then you have bikes and then e-scooters. Maybe e-scooters would be a better example of licensing. But again, some people want it, some people don't.
Ken, I wonder what, when you click on, because I know when you rent or use one of those that are sitting around downtown Cleveland, you have to have an account and you have to log in and pay for the use. I wonder if as part of a click wrap agreement that you're signing for the use of it, there are any bike laws or cycling laws incorporated.
Oh, yeah. There's a ton of them, I think. Yeah, and there's a ton of responsibility that they put upon the e-scooter, and there's a ton of people that don't read it.
That's the problem. I think they're not reading it.
Right. It's like, you have to have insurance for your car, and you just check that you do, and you go out and drive a car without insurance. It happens all the time. It's unfortunate, and it's hard to enforce.
Gotcha. So we can wrap it up now unless there are additional questions. Do you have any final thoughts, to mention, Ken?
I do. We ended the book with a chapter called "Is It Worth It?" And I think it kind of puts together the risks and benefits that Todd talked about. And there are so many benefits of bike riding for your physical health, for the community, for the pollution, and the economic savings of bicycling. It really outweighs the livability factor. It outweighs, kind of the risk, and it's just a great way. I mean, I just read an article that it adds 5 more years onto your life if you bicycle regularly. Hey, if you play tennis, it adds 10. But it's important to get out there and ride bike for the community and the livability factor. And a lot of people are starting to accept more of cycling because there absolutely is a territorial thing going on between the cars and the bikes. And I hope that lessens. One of the things that really bothers me is when I'm in the metro parks and I'm riding on the road, they yell over, get over on the bike trail, which is unsafe to be riding 20, 25 miles on a bike trail with slow moving walkers and things like that. So I just hope that people get a better idea of the importance of cycling, that it's absolutely legal on our roads except on highways, and that they accept this, and that there's less animosity between us cyclists and the drivers on the road.
That's a good concluding thought. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
and
everybody.
I'd just like to thank our author and your editor for joining us today, and all of you. And if you would like to be included on the distribution list for future book discussions, please let us know, and we'll add you to those. And have a great afternoon, everybody. Enjoy the beautiful weather.
Yeah, Dave. Thanks a lot for having me.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks to you too, Kathy.
Bye-bye.
Have a good weekend.